Okay guys, so this is where we're going to try and put this together, and this is probably more than we're going to ask you to do for next week, but again, this is sort of show you how the final pieces gel. So what we've seen so far is we've seen that we have this capacity in our JavaScript to actually create a new div tag and add it to the page. Now, obviously, we don't want to just, we're not that interested in creating random divs. What we really want to do is we want to find a way to get our data onto the page. And so what we're going to see is how this, how this sort of all interacts. So first of all, I just want to take a quick gander at our data here, right? Flip back to our console. And we notice that there's actually a name, right? There's a name for the object. So it says state data, and then that's an array of 51 things. And so right now when we log our data, we're actually just getting sort of the name, and then it's telling us there's an array. And so actually if we put that state data property in there, right, what we're saying is, hey, give us that array that is inside of state data. And so if we do this upload, always with the uploading, right? Come on. There you go. Okay. We're just going to see a slight difference in our console log here, right? And we see that actually we're getting directly to that, that set of objects, right? So if, for example, and I often recommend doing this before you start going down the road of writing an entire loop, right? Just see what's at element 0, right? Make sure that if you started sort of digging into this data, that you'd be getting what you thought you were getting. So again, I'm going to upload this, right? So I'm just playing with my data here, seeing what happens. And now we see, aha, okay, so we see that the 0th element is Alabama, right? We can dig right into this. So from this, I can say, okay, I'm pretty sure that what I want to do is I'm going to say data, and now I'm going to actually, right, I want to, first of all, I want to create a variable. We're going to see exactly the same, right? Remember back in Candy Sorter, right, where I created a variable and said, get the length of my array. So I know now that my array is data.stateData, right? So I'm going to say, hey, variable num states, okay, is going to be data.stateData.length, okay, and then I'm going to write my iterator, var I equals 0, this is my for loop, right? I is less than num states, of course we know it's the states plus DC, but we're going to just keep that under our hats for now. Okay, I plus plus, right? Exact same syntax. In fact, I could actually just copy this for loop that I already have, right? And then, make changes to it there. This is part of the reason, again, why I want you guys to get comfortable with the idea of changing the variable names here, because it helps you sort of get used to how arbitrary they are. Not to say that they're bad, but simply that because they're arbitrary, you can kind of change them at will. So what I want to do is I'm just going to now do, as I love to, my console log, and I'm going to do data.stateData, right, and I. So again, we see a parallel in our candy function, right, where we had this, except instead of being candy collection, we're just going one depth further into our data. Okay, so data.stateData.length, right, so I'm going to console log this. I'm going to get rid of that one just so I can make sure that I understand what's going on here. What is it not liking about my loop here? What does it say? It says unexpected token. Oh, it doesn't like that semicolon. I should have looked out for that. Do I have that over here? Survey says I do not. Ah, very important there. Okay, so that was my bad. I shouldn't have had a semicolon there. All right, so again, I'm going to upload my script, see what I get. Yes. Right? Boom, right? We now see we're spitting out every single object. It's funny, it looks like there's something weird going on there. Nope, District of Columbia making trouble, right? Always making trouble down in DC. Okay, so here is the exciting part. Now, first of all, sorry, we're not quite at the exciting part yet. It's kind of an exciting part. So remember up here, sorry to jump around like this, but remember up here where I created my div and I gave it an ID of new div? The other thing I can do in here is I can give it a class, just like this. Class is, and I'm going to call this state box. What is a state box? Well, again, we see this part where I start talking about things before I've made them. So if I want this to be a class like box style, right, I want to apply it to multiple things, I'm going to have to say state box. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, use my sort of default 3 things here that let things cascade together, right? Position, relative, display, inline, float, left. I'm going to give them a size, right? So I'm going to say, let's just say the width is going to be, I don't know, 100 pixels, right? We don't want to make these huge. Okay, and that the height is going to be 40 pixels. And we're going to give them a background color of gray because I like grays. Okay, it's going to be my 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep, okay. So that's state box. Now, how can I test out what the effective state box is? Well, I've only created one of them so far, and I've appended this here. So what currently shows up as simply this sort of little div, right? And you can see it's sort of like, it's trying to show it to me on the page, right? You see that little yellow flag that pops up in the top left? It's like, yeah, it's here. It doesn't look like anything, but it's here, I swear. Okay, now we've given it some attitude, right? We've given it some style. So I'm gonna, oops, that's my JavaScript. That's no harm in that, right? Upload my CSS file, right? So now what I've done is I've said, here's the style that you can worry about having, you can apply to it. Come back to my console and see what we get. Aha! Just what we would have hoped. We now have a class. We now have a div with a class of state box that's going inside our div, our first box div, right? So remember, we grabbed that box, that div first box, and we added this thing to it, right? So we grabbed it by the div name here, and we're appending our div to it. Here, get ready for some magic, people. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of clean this up a little bit, right? This has been fine to play with, but I don't really need this second box. And as a matter of fact, I'm not going to worry about keeping this. Well, I'm not going to worry about keeping this class on here, right? I can have an ID without having a class. I can have a class without an ID, as we saw earlier, right? I can have both, right? So these can exist in any combination that's useful for me, depending on what I'm trying to do. So I'm going to say first box, and I've given it this text. I've given it an assigned text color of white. I'm going to change that. Well, actually, no. Let's see. I have a light. Yeah, I'm going to give it dark gray text. Okay. Right. This is why I didn't want you guys starting to do work with the computers on your design assignments too early, because you start to get kind of caught up in the details there. All right. So first box, what I'm going to do is give it a width, and I'm going to say make this pretty big. Make this 900 pixels wide. And on top of that, I'm going to give you a height of, I don't know, let's say 600 pixels. And I'm going to give you a background color. No, I'm not going to give you a background color, but maybe I'll give you a border, right, so I can see where it is. And there's a shorthand for creating a border, and I can say 1 pixel solid and then give it a color. And what that does is I can do these things separately, so I can say I want the border width to be 1 pixel or 3 pixels, and I want it to be solid or dashed or dotted or all of these different styles, and then I can set the color separately as well. This is just a shorthand for putting them all together. And if I do that and I update my style sheet, what I should see is, and also my HTML file, right? Because remember, I removed something from my HTML file there, right? I removed my other div. And come back here, roll it around. Aha! Okay, so now we have this sort of clearly defined box, right? We have this little gray square in it, right? It still has that text in it. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that text just by deleting it from the web page here, right? I can just get it out, right? So now what you see is I just have this container div, right? I have almost nothing in my HTML page, and I'm just adding this one div here. But what do I really probably want to do? I want to add a div for every single state that's here. So I'm going to go ahead and basically just copy this code, right? And so instead of just creating one div, right, what I'm saying here is create a div how many times? The number of states that you have. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and throw a border on this state box as well, just so I can kind of see it. And I'm going to do 1 pix solid. We'll do the same thing, right, because they're littler. Okay, so now that I've done that, what should happen is, since I know that this loop is going to happen, well, hopefully it'll happen 51 times, right? I can use that and just say, hey, listen, go ahead and do that. Now, I don't want to actually have the ID be new div, right? What I can do is I can actually say, I can stick I, right? So remember, I starts out at 0, and then it's 1, and then it's 2. So this will say new div 1, new div 2, new div 3, right? It's really, really kind of fun little trick in there. All right. I realize there's a lot going on here, but I think you guys will be excited about the outcome. So again, sometimes I get crazy and I just upload everything just in case, because I don't know what I've changed. Which belies the idea of being organized about this, but here we go. What do we get? Ta-da! What do we have? Look at this, inspect element. In fact, instead of numbering these things, I could actually give them a name based on something to do with the data, right? I could say, hey, look, I want your name. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that current thing. So var cur state, right, is going to be equal to this. Okay. And then what I could do is say, I could actually just give this an ID that corresponds to, well, I don't want it to be just cur state because that would be an awful lot of stuff. I think what I want to do, and if I go back to my data here and look into it, right, I can see, so the property is called state. That's what has the state name. Or you know what, I might want to use state abbreviation, right? That's a little bit shorter, a little bit easier to match, right? So let's say dot state abbreviation. Okay, here we go. Let's upload that puppy. Okay, and now if we look at elements, what do we see? ID, Alabama, Louisiana, Florida, Georgia. Okay, so now we've got our data actually putting things onto the page. And if we wanted to make some of this data visible, right, we know how to access it, which is just going to be current state dot state abbreviation or state or anything like that. What I can do is, while I have this new div, okay, so the same way that this append command will add the new div variable that I've created here to first box, I can also add text, or in this case, let's say cur state, right? So I can always add text directly to the inside of a div. So since I know that state and state abbreviation are both text, right? Everything in my data is just text. I can just say, hey, now this append method, right, is in the library, is in the jQuery library. And so that's why, again, I have this $ in parentheses around my new div, because I'm saying, okay, go look in jQuery and then use the append method to add the current state's name to new div. Okay, again, a little bit of an inverted grammar, a little bit different, but that's how you can read this code sentence, right? Grab this div, right? Look up the append function in the jQuery library. Go to the jQuery library, look up the append function, take this text and stick it into there. And if we do that, our last little bit here, okay, we're going to go back and reload. Ta-da! So, not the most gorgeous thing in the world, but starting to see how this is all coming together into visual elements that can actually build something on our page. So we're gonna take a look at this in class on Thursday. We're gonna continue to work with this, so I don't want you guys to feel overwhelmed, okay? Again, we're crashing out a lot right at the beginning here, but I think you're really gonna start, as we continue to work with this, it's really gonna start to come together. As always, feel free to email, make office hours appointments. I would love to see all of you, any of you in office hours. And looking forward to seeing your next assignment on Monday. Stay safe, everybody.